The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, affectionately nicknamed the Jug by the men who flew and maintained it, stands as one of the largest, heaviest, and most powerful single-engine piston fighters ever built, and without doubt one of the most important aircraft of the Second World War. A machine that in many ways epitomized the transition of American aviation industry from producing relatively modest pre-war fighters to fielding true heavyweights capable of carrying out multiple roles. And although it was sometimes underestimated because of its bulk and initial lack of maneuverability compared to lighter opponents such as the agile Japanese Zero or German Bf-109, it proved itself as a supremely effective weapon of war, particularly in the ground attack role where its unmatched durability, heavy armament, and ability to absorb punishment gave Allied forces an indispensable advantage. The story of the P-47 begins in the late 1930s when Alexander Kartveli, chief designer at Seversky Aircraft, later Republic Aviation, sought to respond to the U.S. Army Air Corps' demand for a new high-performance interceptor, and after a series of prototypes including the P-35 and P-43 Lancer, the team settled on a revolutionary design that could house the massive Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp 18-cylinder radial engine, one of the most powerful piston engines ever built, generating over 2,000 horsepower and giving the Thunderbolt its characteristic performance and robust appearance. Unlike sleek, streamlined inline engine fighters such as the Mustang or Spitfire, the P-47 was a brute force machine. Large fuselage to accommodate the massive engine and turbo supercharger system, broad elliptical wings to handle the stresses of high-speed flight and carry a heavy weapons load, and rugged construction that could withstand significant battle damage. Its first flight came in May 1941, and while the sheer size of the aircraft raised eyebrows, it weighed over 10,000 pounds empty and more than 17,000 pounds fully loaded, dwarfing most other single-engine fighters. The performance potential quickly became clear, particularly at high altitude where the turbo supercharger allowed it to maintain power levels that few contemporaries could match. Armed with 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, 4 in each wing, the Thunderbolt packed a devastating punch, capable of shredding enemy fighters in aerial combat and ripping through ground targets including tanks, trucks, trains, and fortifications when employed as a fighter-bomber. Early combat deployment of the P-47 began in 1942 with the 8th Air Force in Europe, where it was initially tasked with bomber escort missions, and while its range was limited compared to the long-distance needs of deep raids into Germany, pilots quickly appreciated its ruggedness and speed in diving combat. The P-47 could outdive almost any opponent thanks to its weight and power, allowing American pilots to employ boom and zoom tactics that emphasized high-speed diving attacks followed by rapid climbs back to altitude. By 1943, P-47 units were claiming significant numbers of Luftwaffe aircraft destroyed, and although the arrival of the P-51 Mustang later stole much of the spotlight in the bomber escort role due to its superior range, the Thunderbolt remained a vital component of Allied air strategy, particularly in the tactical role. In ground attack operations, the P-47 excelled to such a degree that it became synonymous with close air support for ground troops in Europe. Equipped with bombs, rockets, and its 8 heavy machine guns, the Jug could deliver extraordinary firepower on German armored columns, artillery positions, and supply lines, and its thick armor plating and radial engine layout meant it could absorb hits that would bring down most other fighters, allowing it to return home riddled with holes yet still flyable. Countless accounts from pilots tell of Thunderbolts returning with entire cylinders shot out, control surfaces shredded, or fuel tanks leaking, yet still making it back to base, a testament to its durability that made infantrymen cheer whenever they saw a flight of Jugs overhead unleashing fury on enemy positions. In the Normandy campaign, Operation Cobra, the Battle of the Bulge, and numerous other operations, the P-47 was the hammer that bludgeoned German defenses, and by war's end Thunderbolt pilots had destroyed over 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, and countless other targets, making it arguably the most effective ground attack aircraft of the European theater. Yet, its air-to-air record was equally impressive. Thunderbolt pilots claimed more than 20,000 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, an astonishing figure that placed it among the top Allied fighters despite its reputation as a heavy bruiser rather than a nimble dogfighter. Beyond Europe, the P-47 also served with distinction in the Pacific, where its ruggedness was again invaluable in the harsh conditions of island warfare. Though less glamorous than the P-38 or Corsair in that theater, it provided vital ground support and bomber escort roles, earning respect from U.S. Army Air Forces pilots operating from bases in New Guinea, the Philippines, and elsewhere. In terms of variants, the P-47 went through a long evolution, beginning with the early P-47B and C models that entered combat in 1942 and quickly evolving to the P-47D, the most widely produced version with over 12,000 built, featuring improvements in canopy design including the distinctive bubble canopy for better visibility, increased fuel capacity, and the ability to carry a heavier bomb load. The later P-47M and P-47N models were developed to meet specific needs. The M for high-speed interception of German jet fighters like the Me-262, with speeds exceeding 470 miles per hour, and the N for long-range operations in the Pacific, with extended wings and additional fuel tanks enabling escort missions over vast distances such as raids on Japan from Iwo Jima or Okinawa. In total, over 15,600 P-47s were built, making it one of the most produced fighter aircraft of World War II and a logistical triumph for Republic aviation and the American war effort. Pilots who flew the Jug often developed deep affection for it, describing it as a gentle giant that was forgiving to fly, stable as a gun platform, and almost impossible to kill. While some lamented its lack of tight turning ability compared to Spitfires or Mustangs, most appreciated the survivability and sheer destructive power it brought to the fight. Famous aces such as Francis, Gabby, Gabreski, Robert S. Johnson, and Hubert Zemke all scored dozens of victories in the P-47, demonstrating that despite its bulk it could be a deadly air superiority fighter when handled correctly. Beyond the US, the Thunderbolt was used by several Allied nations, including the RAF, Free French Air Force, Soviet Air Force through Lend-Lease, and later post-war by nations such as Brazil and Mexico, both of which flew the type in combat in Europe under US command. The cultural impact of the P-47 was also considerable. Its hulking profile, roaring engine, and devastating firepower became iconic symbols of American airpower, appearing in wartime propaganda, newsreels, and later in films, books, and documentaries that celebrated its contribution to victory. After the war, as jets quickly replaced piston fighters, the Thunderbolt was gradually retired from frontline service, though it continued to serve with foreign air forces into the 1950s and even saw combat in smaller regional conflicts. Today, surviving P-47s are treasured warbirds, flown at airshows or preserved in museums, where their sheer size and thunderous engine still impress modern audiences, and they stand as monuments to the industrial might and engineering ingenuity of wartime America. In assessing the legacy of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, one must recognize that it was more than just another fighter. It was a symbol of overwhelming firepower, endurance, and adaptability, a machine that may not have had the glamour of the Mustang or the nimbleness of the Spitfire but nonetheless racked up an unmatched record of destruction against enemy forces, safeguarded thousands of bombers, and provided ground troops with the close support they desperately needed. The Jug proved that sometimes brute force, when combined with good tactics and mass production, can win wars as effectively as elegance or refinement, and in that sense it remains one of the great unsung heroes of World War II, a colossus of the skies whose thunder still echoes in the annals of aviation history.